I'll put this in on a personal note. When I was studying for my master's final, I was asked to read 12 books, and one of them was about the history of the Punic Wars. And they pictured Carthage as being a city that practiced mind control, black magic, voodoo, and witchcraft, much, much more so than the Romans did. I mean, every society has had this kind of practice go on. But in the case of Carthage, it was part of its official religion, and people with that kind of religious setting would never assimilate with a more, I hate to use the word sane, but I guess that's the best word to think of, a more sane Roman religion. The fight between Rome and Carthage, folk, was largely a fight for the future of the Western world. Had Carthage won, Western Europe might have become nothing more than a bunch of tribal people comparable to what the American Indians became in North America and much of South America. Just a bunch of roaming tribesmen. And learning and civilization might have died, and we might never be as far along advanced as we are. Again, here you can only speculate. What would have happened if Carthage had won? Again, the results might have been really disastrous. As it was, Rome won, and Rome went on to develop a bright, glistening civilization that eventually fell, true, but did not go as far and as far as Europe might have gone had Carthage won. The whole world at this time, the whole Western world was in a state of decline. And some historians have said that Rome fell because it was made of declining material. It was like you find a bunch of rusting parts and put them together and make a car out of rusting parts. The car is destined to not last long because it's made out of decaying, rusting material. That Rome was put together from decaying, rusting material, that the whole Western world was heading downward at this time, and eventually this was to lead to the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages were not to end until the time of the Renaissance in the 1100s. Again, all this is speculation. What might have happened, what could have happened. All right, now, anyway, the Punic Wars ended. The Third War was really a mismatch. I mean, Carthage had no business fighting the war. They had no chance at all to win, but again, there's some people, folk, who just simply, all right, I'll tell you. The Japanese fought hard in World War II. When we dropped 2 atomic bombs on them, they quit fighting. In our own history, again, the American Indians fought hard, but when they saw they could not win, after a while they quit. The Confederacy fought hard during the Civil War, but when the Confederacy saw it could not win, they laid down their arms, went home, and quit. There are some people who never lay down their arms and quit. Carthage was one of them. The only thing Rome could do with them was enslave them all and scatter them throughout the world. And there they died out and ceased to exist as a people. Nothing else would work. But again, that Third War they should never have engaged in. They had no chance at all to win. It was just a matter of, we won't quit fighting. And yes, folk, we have people like that today. I'll let you ponder that one for a while. We'll get back to that. So you might say, put a bookmark there. All right, Roman Republic. The wars, at first the wars that Rome fought occurred here in Italy, where a soldier would go off for a few miles, fight, stay a few weeks, and come back home, having been missed by his family. But then the Punic Wars were to last many, many years and call for soldiers going away and staying away for maybe a good many years. And during this time, his wife and children were expected to run the estate, and oftentimes they could not do all the work that needed to be done. With the result, a lot of times the Roman soldier might come home with one leg missing or one arm, or in a state of crippledness. Or he'd come home and find his wife had to sell the farm because she couldn't, or he'd come home. Well, basically, folks, the wars were hard on family life and hard on a lot of people. What happened was most of your small farmers lost their farms, and these farmers were gobbled up by the richer farmers. I mean, many a Roman would come home and find his wife had married another man. I mean, this is common in the time of war. Or, and a lot of times, too, these men would go and find another wife and come home with a different wife. I mean, again, folks, this is war. It's not just the killing that goes on a battlefield, it's all the other problems that are associated with it. And I spent 6 years in the Army, and I can tell you a story of one young man who was in the same outfit I was, and he went on a summer camp and got heavily drunk. His sergeant caught him and he, oh, please, don't tell him. Oh, don't tell him, Church. Please, don't. The sergeant didn't tell him, but you maybe get the picture. When I played a 3-week war game in California, they would not allow us enlisted men to go to Las Vegas or to go to any place except to stay right there in the desert for 3 weeks. The officers, some of the high-ranking officers could get off and go to these places. The enlisted men couldn't. But anyway, the wars were really hard on family life. Well, the aristocrats wound up owning just about all the land. A lot of small farmers drifted into cities, and they became what we call the landless poor. And by the way, these landless poor, Rome never did solve the problem of the landless poor. Just a whole lot of idle, poor people who could not find work, and the state wound up feeding them. Well, two boys, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, both had the same name. They were aristocrats, but they believed that the government should do something to help these poor people. So Tiberius, being the oldest, he went first. He went before the Senate. And he said to the Senate, I think that we should, you aristocrats, and all of us aristocrats who have taken lands of the poor, that we should keep the lands that we absolutely need, but the lands that are excess, that we don't really need, we should give back to the poor people we've taken them from. The Senate turned a deaf ear. Well, Tiberius appealed again. Eventually some senators got together, and folks, this is the way politics was run at the time. We're going to be talking more about this in a little bit. They killed Tiberius. I mean, this was one way they solved their problems with political opponents at that time. Tiberius was assassinated. His younger brother Gaius took up the same call. Let's distribute public lands to the poor. Gaius was also assassinated. Well, this was bad enough. I mean, all this did was inflame the passion of war, because the poor people thought, hey, our champions are gone. We had champions in the Senate, two brothers, but they're gone. Now, folks, let me insert something on a personal note. I mean, this is not really personal. This is my own personal belief. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus are looked on as being heroes in modern times. I have to state, I think they were wrong. They were courageous. I don't doubt their courage. I don't doubt their conviction. They believed they were right. But taking lands from the rich and just giving to the poor is simply what you call redistribution. It's socialism, pure and simple. It's being tried a lot in the 20th century and 21st century, being tried in a lot of places around the globe, including here in the United States. People who went through the Depression, most of them are now old and dying, but there's recently, in the last few days, been a series of documentaries about the Roosevelts. Have any of you watched it?
I watched that.
Okay, excellent, a couple of you. What they say about Depression, that Franklin Roosevelt's attempts to combat the Depression led to two things: higher prices and lower wages, which hurt the people he was saying he was trying to help. And during his socialistic programs, made the Depression worse instead of better. Now, folks, any history book you read will tell you this. This is not just me talking. He did not end the Depression. The Depression finally ended when the country got involved in World War II, and all of a sudden everybody was employed. But his socialistic programs did not end it. And I have to say, with all due respect to the Roman Senate, no, they shouldn't have killed the Gracius brothers. That's not politics. That's simply murder. They should have at least let them have their form, let them have their say, and they had every right to vote it down if they didn't agree with it. But what should have been done, what should have been done to help the poor? Grover Cleveland had the right idea, I think. Many years before the Great Depression, a group of people marched on Washington and said, hey, Mr. Cleveland, you need to build bridges. Our country needs bridges, our country needs roads, our country needs schools. Use government money to put all of us to work. And Grover Cleveland said, all of you, I'm sorry, I feel go home. Then the people had to realize the government was not going to end the depression for them. They got to work at ending themselves, and the depression was over. What should have been done, the government should have simply said to these poor people, we're not going to help you. If you don't work, you won't eat. You find work, make work, find a business, set yourself up, do the job yourself. Now, folks, if that sounds hard and cold and cruel, I'm sorry. But this is what I think would work better. But what the Gracius brothers intended to do, take the land from the rich and give it to the poor, which has never worked anywhere where it's been tried. But again, they go down in history, particularly in modern liberal circles, as heroes, martyrs for their cause. And well, they were martyrs for their cause. Yes?
But in that time, most people did work for themselves, and it was a lot
But
of
what happened? They lost their land.
Yeah, but to have nothing to do, to start nothing with nothing, how you do it? They couldn't have, the states couldn't have given them like
Our own pioneer ancestors just simply moved into the wilderness and started over from scratch.
Right.
That's one thing they could have done. But what they were doing, what Caesar Augustus did a few generations later was give them bread, he basically fed them and entertained them, bread and circuses, which we'll talk about later. And this simply guaranteed, hey, they're going to stay poor. I believe that there was something, each individual, one individual might have decided he was going to start a tanning shop, another might have packed up his family and moved into the wilderness somewhere, moved out into Spain or someplace and started all over with nothing. You're right, it's difficult to start with nothing from nothing. But, oh, it can be done. It's better than depending, the government's going to get us out of this, so the government won't. Just ask people who went through the Depression in the 30s or watch the documentary, which is going to be online. My wife is not watching online. I have not seen it all, but I hope to watch it. I mean, I find it very, very interesting. But again, tell about how in our country we tried to fight the Depression with the government and the poor people. Roosevelt will get us out, and they remain poor.
Since there aren't any lectures coming up right away, can we use that as because it's a lot of them.
The only problem with it is it does not deal with ancient history.
Oh yeah.
It's not ancient history, but you got a point.